Hello and welcome everyone to the very first episode of your new program, The Canadian Spectrum. And just like the name might tell you, this program talks about the wide spectrum, the wide variety that is available in the Canadian Great Canvas and Mosaic. In each episode, we will be discussing a controversial issue that is of importance to the people living in Canada and around the world. And as you know, Canada has people from all walks of life. The people from different cultural backgrounds, different ethnic groups, different religious groups, etc., etc. In today's episode, we'll be discussing a very controversial issue of secularism. What is secularism? And we will also pose 3 questions to different groups of people. The first question will be, is secularism a prerequisite for democracy? Meaning that if you are not a secular country, this means that you're not a democratic one? Second question will be, is secularism a political system per se, or is it a more comprehensive and a more encompassing way of life? Third question is there any relationship between secularism and atheism? In other words, the more secular the country is, the more atheist people will find in this country? To find out, let's go and ask the people now. Secularism, which emerged in Europe, is defined as a socio-political or philosophical system that rejects all forms of religious intervention by separating political issues from the elements of religion. It is also defined as opinions seeking to exclude religious foundations from all the civil and local affairs of states. There are many characteristics of secularism, including separation of religious and state, protecting both religious and non-religious citizens and equality among them, the freedom of people whether to choose to commit or to be free from religion, reliance on democracy and equity among citizens irrespective of their religious affiliation, equal use of public services such as schools and hospitals, protection of freedom of expression. It is important to note that secularism does not mean atheism and does not impose it on its citizens. Is secularism a prerequisite for democracy? So, can we have a religious state that is democratic?
Yeah, I think that in my opinion, I know that most states and countries that are democratic are also secular, just because I personally do believe in the separation of state and religion, and I think that's really important in terms of getting people to vote for and vote based on issues, based on their opinion on issues, rather than, which political leader they might identify the most with in terms of religion.
So I think a religious state or a theocracy would prevent any democracy or prevent people expressing themselves fully?
I wouldn't go as far as saying that it prevents people from expressing themselves fully, but I do think that it pushes people to vote for political leaders based off of different reasons potentially, other than, how they feel on certain issues, and more so on how they feel about, I'm Christian, so I'm going to vote for the Christian guy, or I'm XYZ, so I'm going to vote for this guy.
Okay.
I think not necessarily. I think there are countries that have functioned without secularism as their way of structuring their country, but I do think that there are countries that are secularist that do have democracy prevalent and try to shape their country through that. But in all honesty, I don't think there's a lot of very democratic countries out there in general, whether it is Western or non-Western. I think there's a lot of issues in all countries in general. Yeah.
But do you think there are any democratic countries that are non-secular?
Throughout history, I think there have been, but currently, I wouldn't say that there are many countries that are both non-secular and democratic. Yeah.
of having, democracy in a religious state or a theocracy?
Right. Well, it depends on which religion you're talking about.
Any of them.
See, I would differ. I would actually, I would challenge that because, for example, in a Christian religion, in a Christian state, a true Christian state, the principles would be governed by love and laying down your life for one another.
Okay.
Right? And so I don't think secularism has to be the prerequisite for democracy. I think you could have democracy without secularism.
I don't feel secularism per se is a prerequisite for democracy. I just feel that the freedom of religion is a prerequisite for democracy because democratic institutions, democratic countries should be able to let people practice any religion, any type of thing that they want, and including people into the fabric that is a multicultural society should include the freedom of religion as well. But secularism, I feel the way it's used nowadays, it's kind of like gagging people into not believing in the Lord or whatever creation that they believe in. I just feel like just having the ability to choose whatever religion you want is a part of democracy, not secularism.
And do you think we can have a religious democratic state? Is that possible?
Yeah. For example, like Sharia law, in particular, if people are following true Sharia, then democracy is feasible. But now people misconstrue what is said in the Quran, what's said in the Torah, what's said in the Bible, and in terms of like governing different bodies. That I feel like nowadays it's not useful. But back in the day, I feel that it would have been much more useful and much more able to do so in the past.
Is secularism a political system per se, or is it more comprehensive and an all-encompassing way of life?
For some, it's a political system. For some, it's a way of life. I sort of see it as a bit of both. A way of life as far as following laws and the way that certain programs are implemented in a country. But my way of life is based upon my faith.
It's more social political depending on like the people that kind of run that country and that kind of like govern how things occur.
Does it affect like aspects of life like education, like marriage, like rights of the LGBT community?
Oh, definitely it does. I do think that like education-wise, things should be a bit more secular. If like people want to have like more privatized like education and want to like have their kids learn in a specific like Islamic or Christian or Catholic or Jewish structure, they can work on their own schooling. But in general, I think public education should be more secular because then that way it's like welcoming into like a growth of like, a lot of new different ideas.
I think it can be both. I mean, it definitely is a political system where, people have the right to vote for whoever they choose. But at the same time, I think it can also be a way of life in terms of living in a society where you do have freedom of speech and where you're free to practice any religion you like.
I feel it is a political system because I feel sometimes people misconstrue secularism for atheism and make it interchangeable. But secularism nowadays, as you've been seeing like in Quebec, there's a gag order that's been happening where people who wear religious symbols, i.e. the hijab or the kippah that the Jewish men wear, they cannot wear it as public servants. So they can't be judges, they can't be teachers, they can't work in the public sector, which is horrible. And that's their reasoning for that is secularism. But also they want to enforce a different religion, which some people feel like they're trying to enforce Christianity on people when there are so many different religions in Quebec and Canada in general.
Is there any correlation between secularism and atheism? In other words, if a state is secular, does this mean that we will have more atheists in this state?
I think historically that answer would be yes. Like if you look at societies that have become more and more secularized, there has been a growth of like atheism and atheist ideology. I think people might argue the latter of it and be like, no, there's actually no correlation. But historically, if you were to look at it, that's what like exists.
I don't think that's the case. I think that Canada has a secular-based government, of course, but there's the freedom of religion. And I mean, I don't know the stats on the number of atheists, but I think when maybe you get into places like the United States, it's a different story. But I don't think it's here. I'm not thinking it is.
I would say that I don't think there's a direct relationship between secularism and atheism, but I do think that there is a relationship between like atheists who are comfortable with saying that they're atheists. And I think that there is a relationship between like people saying that they don't identify with the kind of like overall prevailing religion of a country when there is democracy. That's my own personal opinion. I don't have any numbers on that. That's just...
I think it does play a factor. I don't think it's a huge factor for it. I feel that because we're in a secular society now where we try to, like, people try to allow to follow whatever religion they want, more people are turning towards being atheists, because back in other different countries where there's different strict religious governing, people were forced into religion by government officials. For example, we've seen it. One is an Islamic state, but there's so many people, when they come to Canada, they become atheists because Islam was forced upon them there. And I don't think religion should be forced upon anybody, even though I'm Muslim and, you know, I believe Islam is a great religion. I feel like religion in general shouldn't be forced upon anybody. So, like I said, they're forced to be Muslim, women are forced to wear hijab, they come to Canada, most of them turn atheist or become agnostic.
I think it definitely affects, because the more the ideology of secularism gets into maybe the education system, I think people will grow up with a bias towards rejecting God or not accepting godly values, or maybe not exploring that as much, because now that's seen, again, because people are repulsed by certain actions that people do in the name of God. You know, it becomes repulsive to them. But so it becomes, again, marginalized, set to the side, and now society doesn't explore these values anymore, because now we're going to this other ideology, which is an exclusion of exploring this God that, you know, I guess for me, would be the God of the Bible.
I think secularism, if it's something that is accepted in a society, then people who are atheists feel comfortable in sharing their faith. But in my experience, you know, in mostly religious countries, you can also find people who are, you know, most likely atheists. And it's hard to presume that about them, but it's they do not show it due to the society and the cultural norms of their society. I don't think that secularism somehow forces people into atheism. It just makes it more open in the public.
A spectrum indeed. And as we saw, there was a big variety and a wide plethora of opinions regarding all the different questions. And this is the beauty of Canada. This is the beauty of life. Thank you very much for joining us during our first episode today. But please, this is not the end of our meeting. We are waiting for your comments. Please share your comments below this video, and please press like and subscribe to our channel so you can always follow whatever new products we have. Also, if you need to further contact us, you can always contact us through the email that is appearing right now on the screen. Thank you very much for your kind company today. Take care and see you next time. If you had a room with a view, what would you like to see? A blue morning sky, calm lake, wild river or sea, or a green hill where you may lie under a tree. What would you like to see? What would you like to see? Pure white snow, ice sheets where you can ski, warm yellow sandy beach, relax and be free. Violets to gazers, for lovers and to be. What would you like to see? What would you like to see? A red sun on the horizon in a mystical spree. An orchard of oranges with the spring jubilee. It's better to enjoy 2 colors, maybe 3. What would you like to see? What would you like to see? Better still a rainbow with colors from A to Z. 1 color would kill us, don't we all agree? Like nature needs colors, so do we. Like